So it looks like we have 11 participants. Oh, numbers going up. That's great to see. My name is Tim Swick, and I'll be leading today's session on From Panic to Purpose, and I'll be discussing my path as a CSTA Responsible AI Fellow this year. And we'll also be looking at ways to protect critical thinking now that we are in the age of AI. I'll kind of pause for just a minute. And just so everybody has an opportunity to join. And just so you're aware, as we go through this, I will try and build in some opportunities for people to provide feedback. We really don't have a official chat as is typical. So if it's okay, we'll use the Q&A area to kind of relay messages back and forth. As a presenter, I'm probably not really going to be able to enter a question per se the same way that participants can. I can respond to questions, but I can't start a question. So basically, I'll be mentioning for people to please put comments into the Q&A. Give folks just another minute or two to get settled. And again, just if you've joined, my name is Tim Swick, and I'll be leading your session today. On From Panic to Purpose, we'll be discussing my work as a Responsible AI Fellow with CSTA, as well as looking into some of my thoughts that I've been working on how to handle critical thinking in this age of AI that we are now a part of. Before we get started, if you have any specific needs, let me know. Again, we'll use the Q&A as our chat as we go through. I will monitor Q&A as best as I can as we go throughout this session together, but I may not be able to get everything in immediately, just giving y'all a heads up. Okay, so it looks like our participant numbers have kind of settled out. So we'll just go ahead and we'll start our official start to our session time together. One last time, I'll introduce myself. My name is Tim Swick, and I'll be working today with leading your webinar. So we're going to talk about From Panic to Purpose. I'll be kind of reviewing what my work has been looking at this year, participating as a Responsible AI Fellow through the Computer Science Teachers Association. And also, the majority of my work that I've been doing has really been looking at one specific area, which has been a concern of mine, which is how can we protect critical thinking in this new age of education with AI. So we'll start here, and this is a question really that I have heard from a number of different educators over the last few years in particular, and this is kind of that panic that I've seen that has developed in educators in a variety of different settings. And it's maybe not a question I've heard exactly phrased as this, but it's something that's kind of at least been in my thoughts, which is, are we at a point now where schools are broken because we've introduced this ability to use AI, specifically looking at the rise of chatbots? And really, if we trace things back, I think at least our current experiences or understanding with AI really can be traced back to a very specific date. And I do remember this date. I don't know if anybody else does, but on November 30th, 2022, I remember hearing about this company I'd never heard before called OpenAI, and they released this thing that I really didn't understand much about what it was at the time, which was this tool, this product called ChatGPT. I saw it all across my social media feeds, and then just the next couple of days, it was literally in every news that I brought up, whether it was a social media feed or even on the network news, talking about this AI chatbot that could basically answer questions for people, and it was really went viral. And so really it went viral to the extent that this tool, which was amazingly free, was signed up for by more than 1 million users in just its first week, which really at that time set a record. And I remember an immediate response from educators In particular, there were a couple of different commentaries, articles I saw published. I think the first one here was actually published in the New York Times, written by Daniel Herman. And basically, he penned it as saying, okay, now that we have this tool, ChatGPT, this is the end of high school English. And this is what I refer back to as this panic phase. And I feel still in some ways are still in this panic phase with AI. And that it really has kind of upended some traditional things with education. There was another article I ran across called "The College Essay is Dead," and I've actually heard this from a number of specifically high school teachers, because what this has led to is now is with these tools, how can we teach students about proper English or how to write an essay? And I think that's a valid concern. I don't want to sound like I'm skeptical of that concern. I share that same concern. And I think what I want to outline in today's session is really what I consider is a possible response or a possible path forward. So when we look at this question about has AI broken schools, I really listed out the four main reactions that I've seen. And this is by no means a specific study that I've conducted. This is really just in conversations that I've had with educators. I teach in South Carolina. And so mainly this is what I've heard from the teachers in South Carolina. I have actually worked a little bit with some teachers in Indiana. And so I do have some feedback from Indiana teachers just in conversations. But mainly what I've seen in my area is a lot of what I would just call silence with AI. Our district and our state, I've actually been a little bit shocked by the lack of action specifically towards creating frameworks and creating resources for teachers to support navigating this new world that we find ourselves in. I would say, at least in my area, the most common response to these tools has been to ban them. Actually, the district I work in now bans these tools for students. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about that. I understand on one level why we're banning them, at least initially, but I think long term, this is not going to be an effective way forward for really preparing students for the new world that we live in with AI. Mainly what I'm seeing is a panic over the integrity of how can we trust what students turn in with these tools, specifically because you can use prompting and basically encourage these tools to do the work for you. What I'm seeing a lot of is policy first thinking. For example, I look at my own district's policy towards AI, and I'll be honest, my real opinion is that it's been written by a lawyer that has been hired by our district. It's more from a legal perspective, just to cover ourselves. And as I go through the talk today, you'll see I really feel like we need to not just look at these legal responses, these what I guess, for lack of a better term, knee-jerk answers, where I think we're looking for the short term rather than the long-term benefit. And so one of the questions that I ask in response to when I hear as AI broken schools, and this is not necessarily something more than I do internally, is AI creating these problems that we're talking about? Or is it simply just exposing these existing problems that we really haven't addressed effectively as educators? And so there are different sections throughout today's webinar where I'm going to ask for some feedback. This is going to be the first one. So if you can use the Q&A section down there and respond either with thoughts or experiences of your own, responding to your feelings towards has AI broken schools, and kind of I want to hear from you, or answer your thoughts and feelings to that other question, which is AI creating these problems or simply exposing things that already existed? I'm going to pause and give you a chance, an opportunity to collect your thoughts, and then if you don't mind putting them in the chat, and then I'll kind of respond to these questions as I see them pop up. So I'll read this first one from Vic. Our curriculum team came up with a potential legal issue and spoke to our legal team and received an answer regarding the integration of our curricular resources into our AI tools. Our current agreements prohibit placing curricular resources into the AI tools. We cannot copy and paste curricular content into the tools, nor can we upload or link attachments from the curriculum. They stated that permissions allow teachers to summarize tasks, skills, or lessons for which they want resources, but anything placed in the AI tool must be original work they have created. Future agreements could address this if the curricular vendor is willing. Are others seeing or hearing similar concerns? This is really interesting to bring up, and I don't want to gloss over the issue that you're bringing. Honestly, as I'm reading this question, I think a true and thoughtful and valid response, quite honestly, is going to take probably an hour or so of its own. And I would say that this really highlights a larger issue, which is with AI tools, how can we respect, honor / protect copyright? For example, if I'm interpreting your response here correctly, if you're purchasing or contracting with other curriculums and importing it into an AI tool, that seems like a violation of that person's copyright. So I would say I have seen these concerns. I haven't necessarily worked with it directly in my area, but I do think, for example, having AI create things based on uploaded documents that someone else published is going to present some pretty ethical, murky areas. Stacy says I'm echoing. I'm not sure how I can fix that. I'll look into it. I'm sorry. Adina says, I believe that it created a problem. Students aren't forced to work out the issues themselves, ponder, create, think, and learn from mistakes. They find the perfect answer and then run with it immediately. Adina, I would absolutely agree completely with that statement. And I think part of today's session was basically from my own thoughts in that area. These tools like ChatGPT can do the work for the student quite easily. So part of my mission this year has been to come up with a way to basically make peace with these tools and still protect critical thinking. Colleen and Randy, we think it's just another thing we need to adjust to. That's actually great to hear. That's actually very, I feel like, in a very light, enlightened response. I do feel like we can't hit the backwards button. I think we can't stick our heads in a hole in the ground. We can't ignore these tools. It's definitely a major rethink, and there is a lot of adjustment that needs to take place. And hopefully, in our session today, I can give some thoughts on how to find the right direction forward for that. I'm not going to say I have answers. I'm going to say I have thoughts. Eldred shares AI is exposing issues in education, and in the right settings with correct instruction, it is expanding the educational experiences. And I would say, Eldred, that is my hope. I feel like AI is a tool, and just like any tool, it can be used to great benefit or great negative responses as well. So I would say that's kind of been my mission lately, is to really look for ways to use this to benefit others. Came up when Brisk rolled out their curriculum intelligence resource. Okay, thank you, Vic. Sorry. I don't think AI is broken. The schools depend on how the teachers handle it. Thank you for sharing. Ooh, I see here Stacy's doing more unplugged activities and discussions, really forcing kids to be in the here and now. I'm a fan of AI. I'm currently teaching all of them to use it as a tool purposely. That's great to hear. I see Sarah says they're grappling with AI in elementary right now, not allowing students to interact with it until middle school. And I think that's probably appropriate. Sorry, my chat's kind of going crazy on this end. There are definitely, at least my feeling is, some laws in place to protect students. Looks like some of my questions are being answered or disappearing. What I think you've got, what is it, COPA, the Citizens Online Protection Act. Students probably shouldn't be doing these, using these tools independently, at least until the age of 13. So I would say I would advocate for modeling the use of these tools throughout elementary. I would see an issue with students using AI tools at the elementary level, especially because they're still learning how to think critically at a very young age. I think that might be a detriment. That's just my 2 cents. Clemé, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I apologize if I butchered that. AI hasn't broken schools. It's just the onset was so fast that folks were unable to prepare, create a lot of anxiety. I would agree with that. Largest issue for me was linguistic. Language at that time was being used to train AI was not widely used or acquired by my students who speak many different variations of the English language. And I was nervous about how AI would help or hurt them. And that, I think, speaks to another realm of AI, which is bias, which is inherently built into a lot of tools. As you point out, when these tools were initially trained, they may not have been trained across a wide variety of different language uses. Okay. So thank you guys so much. Honestly, I really appreciate seeing and hearing your thoughts. It helps me not just necessarily just speak into a vacuum. That's one of the things that is not my favorite about doing webinars. I understand the purpose, but I guess I'm old school and still prefer to talk to people face to face. So it's really nice to gauge the room and hear some of your feedback from this. And it sounds too, honestly, that a lot of us are already at least connecting on the same page and the same background on our feelings with AI. So I'll move forward. I'm going to talk about myself for a little bit. I'll be honest, not necessarily the most comfortable doing this, but I feel like you need to know a little bit about my background as we get into some of my thoughts and recommendations with AI. I'll start here. Even before the advent of AI, one thing that I learned as a classroom teacher and as a coach and as a lead teacher, and this is kind of a universal truth, regardless of your educational setting and what tools your students have available to them. But I've learned that students, if they can do the work without thinking, they will. So I've always tried to focus on thinking as a key component of education and really tried to force my students into situations where they had to work and think critically. I think one way that I would demonstrate that is I really preferred not to necessarily answer things directly for my students, but instead give them a path so that they could answer it themselves. I feel like that's probably the greatest service as teachers we can provide our students. I remember I had a chemistry teacher who probably ingrained that in me at a young age. And he's like, I have the answers, but just telling you the answers isn't really going to help you long term. But if I give you the right tools so that you can learn the answers for yourself, then you've really developed as a learner. So I think that's something I've carried with myself about education in general. I've been a teacher for 25 years. There's really kind of two phases to my teaching career. The phase one, which was for 16 years of that 25 years, I worked as a classroom teacher. And then since that time, I've really worked as a coach, a coordinator, and a program lead. I started as a regular classroom teacher in 2001 with very little what you would call ed tech components. I had 2 computers in my classroom. Only one of them actually was connected to the internet. And for the most part, the only reason that computer was connected to the internet was so that I could get emails from my principal throughout the day. But I was lucky in that I was working in a district that was very forward thinking. And I was also lucky because I worked for a principal that really trusted me. We built a classroom. They called it the Classroom of the Future, but then we rebranded it fairly quickly and called it the Integrating Technology in the Everyday Classroom. Basically, that was a room where every one of my students had a desktop computer and they had access to the internet. And we really were working on some curriculum in some neat and interesting ways to really look at how to support students in the age of the internet at that time. Very quickly, Chromebooks came out, and that classroom switched from a classroom with desktops to a classroom with Chromebooks. I also had the opportunity to move from that classroom into a Montessori classroom experience. So my classroom teaching experience really goes across a variety of settings. I've taught in a Montessori space. I've taught in a technology enriched space. And then I also remember when I taught in a classroom where the greatest piece of technology in the room was actually the overhead projector. So I really feel like I pull from those variety of experiences as I've moved outside of the classroom. I've worked as a technology learning coach. I also helped develop and create a computer science magnet for an elementary school where our curriculum was focused on integrating things like coding, robotics, and all sorts of things with computer science. And we integrated it into learning experiences across a variety of subjects. So we tried to integrate computer science into things like English classrooms, math lessons, science lessons, and so on. We focused really primarily on project-based learning. And then we also tried to build it around the standards that teachers were actually having a hard time teaching. And so I worked in that capacity for about 5 or 6 years. And then most recently, I've moved into more of a STEM coordinator position where I'm really guiding curricular decision making and so much and so forth along those lines. So that's just a little bit of a background about me as an educator. So I've kind of really seen myself as a teacher that's kind of on the edges in my early classroom experiences. Now that I've taught for 25 years, I really see what I was doing was building a foundation for what my core beliefs are about learning, which is that learning is typically what I call a design problem. And so what I look at is students love responding to tasks. They love to see that they're engaged. I don't think that we should shoot for compliance. I would say to that level, I think quiet classrooms are very compliant typically. So I don't have a problem with my students being noisy. I feel like that's when learning is taking place, is when they're really actively involved with tasks at hand. And this, I feel, also forces them to think. And this is where I think the rigor really starts to shine, is when students are put in situations that really get them thinking. So this is kind of a quote that I relate to that. This is actually a poster that's always been in my classroom. And I don't remember exactly who to attribute it to. I know it's been attributed typically to Confucius, but I remember reading somewhere that that's actually not true. But anyways, I feel like part of who I am as an educator has always been trying to stay true to this quote, which is I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, and I do and I understand. So typically in my classrooms, I try not to be the only one talking because I feel like if students are listening to me, they're going to forget what I'm saying. And I do try to teach through visual means, but I try not to just give them things to look at because I know while they see it and they'll remember it, they may not really understand it. So to get students to that level of understanding, I've always felt to really focus on what I call the actions of real world examples to get students in the act of doing. And so that really is kind of my foundation there. As I moved out of the classroom and worked more as a coach and a curriculum supporter, I've really tried to help classroom teachers innovate their practices through things like computer science and technology. And mainly, I try to help policy meet reality for teachers' classroom settings, a way to balance the technology with the human impact, to help design solutions that are scalable, to focus on real world cases so students can see that learning has an application to their life. And I also try not to just focus on using cool and fancy tools. What I really try to focus on is building teacher capacity so that the tool is just an element or an aspect of the learning that is taking place. And to that regards, what I typically try to tell teachers is we want our students not just to know how to use a Chromebook or how to use a certain tool. In the case of this webinar today, I would say we don't want them to just know how to use AI, but we want them to understand how to create meaningful products using these tools. Okay, so that kind of leads me into why I feel this AI fellowship matters and why it's important today. As I've shared, I kind of feel myself working at the boundaries of education, trying to navigate this world of public policy with actual classroom practice. How do we take innovation and make it accountable to student learning. And so you take all these things that are really my background as an educator, as a teacher, as a curriculum developer. And I feel like AI has kind of put a spotlight on all of those really quickly. And it's kind of brought these all together into one kind of arena. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with CSTA, but the Computer Science Teachers Association, they've partnered with a couple of different agencies, a couple of different nonprofit groups, and they put together an opportunity for educators to look at responsible AI use. And so I applied and was selected to participate. I think there's 16 others, maybe a total of 16 of us all together this year, working in different teams and developing our response to how can we support teachers and students in this age of AI. And really the way I see it is it's an opportunity for us to provide frameworks, not tools for districts and teachers, a way to give teachers permission to use AI and support redesigning tasks in the classroom so that they're AI ready, a way for us to provide the proper language when speaking to leaders so that we're not driven by fear when we respond to AI. And then at a bigger picture, we have these AI learning priorities that are published by CSTA, and we're trying to help build that out as a vision. So the fellowship is not really about learning more about AI. It's more about clarifying and defining how, as humans, specifically educators, how can we navigate this world? How can we use these tools in responsible ways? So really, I wanted to kind of just share what I considered some key clarifications for myself, and I hope other educators can benefit from this as well. First clarification about the Responsible AI Fellowship is it's really about instructional design work. It's not about building monitoring systems so that we can detect when students are using AI. It's not about punishing students for using AI, but rather it's more about thinking about how to redesign tasks and construct them so that they work in the age of AI. How can we sequence cognitive load demands for students? How can we, and in that kind of to kind of dive deeper into that comment about how can we sequence things cognitively, basically, how can we create a spectrum of activities so that young learners to older learners can develop greater understanding of these tools and basically initial interactions to more developed and complex interactions over time. And then intentionally build in what I call friction points so that students really have to think about the appropriate use of using these tools. Another way of thinking about that is encouraging students to reflect on the answers they get from AI and really think about, is this accurate? Is this answer biased? Is this something that I would say reflects my thoughts, or am I being given an answer? And I'll dive into that in a little bit deeper in just a minute. So basically, responding to this thought, when I look at responsible AI tasks and curriculum development, I feel like if we go back to the very beginning of the seminar and we talk about the initial fears with AI, and if we have a tool that can write essays, maybe if AI can do that, then what we really need to think about is this assignment now is broken. And we need to recraft it for this new modern age. Not saying that the essay is dead, but it needs to be modernized. So that brings me to clarification 2, which is I don't feel just building AI literacy is enough. I do think students need to recognize what AI is and how it works. But I think we really need to shoot for what I call AI agency. And that is developing in students the ability to internalize for themselves about how and when to choose and use these tools. And I have some suggestions in a minute that I'll share about how to approach that thought. And so really that also emphasizes and highlights this statement, which is students are going to need to understand how to create using AI. We don't want them just to be users of AI. And for example, I know you can go to AI and write a prompt that says, write my essay for history about the Civil War and where were the main influences of this. But that would be an irresponsible use, and we would want to create models and examples that offer a counter to that. And then my third clarification is the real risk that we see with AI, and I think this is echoed in the responses people shared earlier in the chat or Q&A, which is really what we risk is something that I think the term that I would use is called cognitive offloading, which is to put the thinking on the tool. So offloading is where the AI tools are providing things like a judgment, creating the product, providing the synthesis for the child, for the learner. And then the AI tools also handle voice. So for me, when we talk about cognitive offloading, it's basically telling the tool, I want you to make the judgments. I want you to create this for me. I want you to synthesize and provide me an overview. And then we lose a lot when we do that. So when I think about responsible AI, a clarification we need to make is if students are using AI to do these things, to offload their thinking, that's a danger. And we need to make sure that when we talk about using AI, that we avoid that. So the danger is not that students use AI here. It's that they're going to stop thinking or stop practicing thinking if they're not taught proper ways to use these tools. So that brings me to, okay, now what do? We recognize the issue. We've discussed the problem. Where's our path forward? Now, this is not a nuts and bolts approach per se in this webinar. This is more of, how can we look at district policies or even classroom practices? So I have 4 shifts here that I want to outline that we should be trying to promote in our practice. Shift 1, I think we need to move away from banning these tools. I think we need to stop asking, is AI allowed in this tool? I think we need to replace that response with, okay, let's look at this task. What thinking is required in this task? How can we protect this level of thinking and still allow students to use AI along the line? What decisions do we want the student, human, the learner to be making here? What don't we want the AI tool doing? So focusing here on policy that describes what are our thinking expectations of the different things that we're doing in our classrooms. I don't think we want to say necessarily that we're banning tools, but we want to say that when you use these tools, here are the non-negotiables. We don't want this tool to be creating things for you. We want it to be an assistant to the thinking that you're doing. Shift 2 that I would like to argue for, which is what I would refer to as designing backwards from that human judgment. Identify the non-negotiables, the perspectives, the ethics, protect those, and work backwards to design an assignment that's protecting the judgment, but still allowing the use of an AI tool along the way. Shift 3 is to treat AI as a developmental issue, not a binary one. I think some of the responses I've seen are what I would refer to as one size fits all. I think sometimes certain leaders right now are looking for that, what I call that magic pill or that magic PD, where it's a session where you hire a company to come in and train everybody in an afternoon or in a day or two on how to handle AI in your classroom. I don't feel that that's really an effective response to the challenges we're seeing. I would argue more for districts to think about scaffolding their response and having age, task, and purpose-specific ongoing training for teachers. Normalize the use of AI in the classroom, but make sure that you're building reflection opportunities for students. They shouldn't just be using these tools in secret. They should be using them in an open discussion in the classroom. And one of the things that I would encourage is whenever you're using these tools, whenever you're getting an answer from these tools, to provide some sort of way for students to reflect on and evaluate what it is that their response was they got from the tool. And in saying this, I would say responsible AI instruction is not something that just takes place at a certain age level or a certain grade. It's something that needs to be taking place in all classrooms across all grade levels. Shift 4, final shift, is to build a shared language, not just a policy. What I've seen is a lot of what I call responsible use documents created. And typically what they do is they talk about what you're not allowed to do. And I feel like a more effective strategy here would be to really have districts investigate in developing common definitions so that we all are using the same language when we're talking about these tools. Oops, hit the wrong button there. And then also working with teams at the district level to create examples that can be shared of what is a proper responsible way to use AI in different classrooms, in different examples, and in different settings. And then also develop instructional conversations, using the opportunities that we have available to us to discuss using these common definitions that we might want to outline and discuss how can we develop instructional tools around these shared examples, around these common definitions that really help us move the conversation forward with how to responsibly use AI. So I'd like to see a shift away from trying to control AI use and really focus more about a coherence about how to use AI. Okay, so I've been talking for a good while, talking into the void here. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to ask for another opportunity for you to kind of provide feedback. I've shared a lot of my thoughts and feelings and how I would like to see things move forward. I told you about myself, told you about my practice, told you about being a responsible AI fellow. I've shared what I think some solutions are at the district level. So I'm going to pause here and encourage you to put some thoughts together. How is your district responding? What policies is your district putting in place? And maybe district isn't the word you want to use, maybe school, maybe classroom, whatever is appropriate to your setting, to your practice, to your role. How are you responding to AI? What policies are you putting in place? And maybe not a policy, maybe it's a type of practice. And again, I apologize if there's still an echo. Sorry about that.
Tim, I'm just hopping on really quick while people type in the Q&A. There
Mm-hmm.
is no echo. We fixed that.
Yay.
And I was clearing out the ones you were answering. I was saying answered live so that it cleared out. So I did not mean to confuse you last time
No,
around.
I figured that out as we were going through it. I was like, okay, because I saw them going into the answered category. It just
Yep,
took me a minute. Thank you, though.
you're good. All right, people. What are the policies that are in place? Or is it none? You can put none in the Q&A too.
Feel free to share an anecdote. Maybe you have a funny story around AI. I'll share while you're typing. I actually worked with high schoolers today, and not because I'm giving this webinar, actually because they brought it up organically. As I shared, our district bans AI, and so my students were sharing with me that doesn't stop them from using AI. They all have cell phones, they reminded me. And the last time I checked, the district can't block AI on their cell phones. And I know they're not supposed to have their cell phones out in our schools, but we know how that goes. Oh, I see some questions coming in or comments. Okay, I see none from May. And Sarah says our district's working on building AI literacy capacity. Yay! And that sounds perfect. That's exactly what I think that would be a model for others. They're building a framework specific to our school district. Perfect. I love the fact, Sarah, that doesn't sound to me like a one size fits all solution, and it doesn't sound like you brought in an external group to guide that discussion. So I think that should hopefully be very valuable. In my K2 building, only teachers use AI. I think that sounds appropriate. Like I said before, I think the COPA law provides some definite protections there that we have to honor as educators. And I think teachers definitely should be allowed to use AI. Our jobs are hard enough as it is. The only thing I might add to that, Marilee or Marley, is maybe look for opportunities to model it with students, just so that they're aware of these tools as they get older, that they'll probably need to understand what they can do and what might be responsible ways to use them. I don't know, Marley, if you've heard of the AI for K-12 group. They actually have some guidance, and they build out a structured way to develop policies for AI from a young age all the way through high school. I don't know if policies, but AI is banned on student devices. Teachers are able to use it. Thanks for sharing, Clemay. Janet says, Janet says the same. Only teachers are using it. My district, Stacy says, we're starting to put together a committee to discuss AI policy. Good. I was asked to be on it, so feel a good bit of responsibility to make sure our students will be guided and encouraged to use responsibly. Well, Stacy, I hope maybe some of what I rambled on today might be beneficial to you. This is the age of AI, and we have to help them prepare for jobs. Absolutely. Careers at this age level for students, we need to shift. And I'm glad that you appreciate my shifts. And I'm interested to hear about you teaching computer science in the high school levels. Adina, next year, we're intentionally figuring out how to integrate AI. So maybe this was very helpful, Adina. What's appropriate for student learning? Where are they at the very foundational stage and they have a lot to learn? Mary says she's not aware of the policy. Heard some students who say I responded to questions at one time and it became an occasion to talk about. And it sounds like you encourage them to talk about AI, which probably sounds like a really good strategy to bring that into your classroom. And then I see Stacy says we also have an AI PD coming up. So, well, basically, to summarize, it sounds like a lot of people are in the same boat I am, where AI is being banned. And I also hear that we're all still at a very initial policy discussions at our schools and districts. So hopefully some of what I've thrown out there to you guys today is going to help maybe guide you through this process. So hopefully some of the things that I've outlined you'll find beneficial to those discussions. Okay, so let's talk for a minute about this beyond education. So this was kind of that section of today's presentation talk about, okay, as educators, we're really responsible for helping guide students throughout their life. And so what are the implications here that has? So why does it matter that as educators, we teach students about AI? Why can't we just stick our hole in the ground? Why can't we just ban these tools? So number one, eventually these kids are going to graduate high school, go to college, get college degrees, hopefully, or if not, find a career choice for them. And whether we like it or not, AI is going to be a big influence in their lives. And I feel like our responsibility as educators is to get this notion across to students. AI tools will fail us when humans defer things like judgment to the tool, when we just blanketly trust the outputs that we're given from these tools. And then this last one I think is really key, and something I'd like to tell a lot of CEOs right now is, if we're just designing workflows that reward speed over sense making, we're really putting ourselves into a dangerous situation. So I feel like our job as educators is to do the opposite of everything you listed here. We want students to always see humans as the one in charge, not the tool. So we need to protect our judgment, our thinking. We need to protect the output and make it ours so that we can trust it. And we still need to understand that speed is not always the most important thing. A lot of what AI does is it does a lot of things quickly. Just because something's done quickly doesn't mean it's done well. And that's something that I would like to get across to a variety of different people. So when we look at this comment here, when people ask, and this is something that I think a lot of current students in college are pondering right now, will AI replace humans? Will AI replace my job? The question shouldn't be, are we designing, the question, excuse me, let me read that correctly. The question should be, are we designing systems that still require humans to think? So I think that's something that we need to try to address, not necessarily just as educators, but as a society. So there are a lot of parallels right now that as educators that we can draw between different careers. For example, in cybersecurity, there's a lot of strategy focus on things like firewalls, detection tools, and compliance checklists. These are things that AI can kind of help support us with. But we also know that AI isn't necessarily going to be able to solve the bigger questions of, these causes for breaches, like phishing scams and credentials that are being reused, and then what we call things like decision fatigue. So because we have these AI tools, that's not going to magically make cybersecurity get better. We still need, the term that I think we hear a lot is, we still need humans in the loop. So I think we need to be careful about assuming AI is just going to replace people. I think we need to be careful about that. And we can draw developments not just with cybersecurity, but a lot of different workforces. They're looking for ways to transfer decision making into automated systems. And this is what I mean earlier by cognitive offloading. For example, you see this happening now in different careers where junior analysts are essentially using AI summaries. And this is a big danger. I think some articles I've written recently where legal briefings have been written by AI tools by completely made up judgments. Engineers trusting AI code. I believe very famously about a month or two ago, Amazon Web Services, AWS, was completely shut down because someone copied and pasted AI code. And then we're also seeing managers that are accepting AI recommendations. Blanketly accepting these AI recommendations can lead to lots of trouble in different ways. And so while I feel like using AI tools is certainly not going to go away, I think we need to see them as augmenting the tasks. Otherwise, what we're going to see is what we call atrophy. And basically, we'll have a workforce of people that are really just trained to use AI tools and not think critically for themselves. And then same thing with when we're looking at designing. When students are working with a prompt, a bad prompt is just going to lead to bad outcomes. So we need to go away from rewarding how fast something can get done. We need to avoid using AI as that shortcut to thinking. And so then what as educators should we be offering to avoid these situations? We need to develop curriculum that focuses on developmental thinking. We need to develop curriculum that explicitly offers opportunities and reinforces reflection. And we also need to clarify to students what's at stake ethically when we turn over and we stop being in the loop when we use these AI tools. So that leads me to kind of the final piece, which is what do you see as education's role? How can we prepare students for careers in AI or for careers with AI? We're running kind of close to the end of our time here, so do your best to put something together. I'm trying not to rush you, but we have a couple other things that I want to get to before we wrap up. So just to repeat, in case I wasn't clear, if you don't mind, use that Q&A, provide your thoughts on what is an educator's role or what is education's role as we look at navigating the future of AI. What should we be spending our time and effort on in our classrooms? I would argue these three elements: developmental thinking, explicit reflection, and clarifying ethical stakes. Do you agree with that? Do you have anything you want to add to it? Do you have anything maybe that isn't on that list that probably should be? May says, I use AI to do lesson planning. I'm teaching students on their project-based learning and students' presentations. No harm to authentic learning. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to go forward just out of the sake of time. Feel free to continue to put your thoughts about education's role, and then I'll read some of those out at the end. But I don't want to overlook the next couple of slides. This actually came out today, and I just kind of wanted to kind of share it with folks. Axios, the online web journal, the CEO of Axios printed a column today called "The Kids Aren't AI Right," and really it profiled that Gen Z, this generation of kids that we're working with, is actually quite scared of AI, probably more scared of it than we are. The polling that he was referring to in his column showed that their number one concern is over their careers. Interestingly enough, AI is probably the first innovation to really affect what we call white collar jobs, and specifically entry level white collar jobs. So kids graduating college, my own son is 21, looking to graduate in the next year. And he's very concerned about what job opportunities will there be. Are there going to be entry level positions for him to apply for in his career field? And then, interesting enough, the polling also showed that kids are actually really upset at schools and school districts because they feel like schools aren't trying to evolve quick enough to prepare them for this new world of AI. They don't feel like they're being taught how to use AI effectively. Anyways, if you're interested, go to Axios, and I believe it's free. I don't think you have to pay for it. And it's written by the CEO, and it's called "The Kids Aren't AI Right." Couple of things I'd like to point out here as we wrap up. So I'm finishing up in July my year as an AI fellow. I'll be presenting about some things that we're developing at the conference in July. So number one, if you're at CSTA this summer, please try and attend my session that I'll be collaborating with some other fellows with. We're going to be talking more in depth about critical thinking. That session will be more of a nuts and bolts approach with some actual classroom examples, as well as some of our suggested pathways. Having said that, they actually have applications open now for next year's fellowship group. Would highly recommend you looking into that. The applications are open now, and they'll close on May 1st. So you've got just a couple weeks left. And I provided the link there, but if you go to CSTA and type responsible AI fellows in Google or whatever search engine you use, you'll find a pretty rapid link that gets you to your application. You do need to be a member of CSTA to apply. Membership is not expensive, so you may want to look into it. If you're not a member yet, consider it. And then going beyond, I've specifically worked as an AI fellow. There is another group out there doing a lot with AI curriculum, and that's ISTE ASCD. They have something they're putting together called Generation AI. As a matter of fact, our group is partnering with their group to kind of do some cohesive work together. So you may want to look at ISTE and go to Generation AI. These resources, to my knowledge, are free and publicly available. They're developing a resource hub. They also have an opportunity for people to join different communities of practice. So I would highly recommend you to get connected. Go to ISTE.org, Generation AI. I don't think they have applications, but I think you can tell them you're interested in joining. And then the next thing I wanted to ask, and this is actually really important to me, is as a CSTA fellow, one of the things they want us to do is to do a survey of our impact. So they encourage us to present in different settings. I would appreciate it if you would go to this bit.ly, Share Learning RAI, and if you would respond. It is anonymous, so respond however you feel. The two things you probably need to know for that bit.ly, one, the organization that I'm working with, the CSTA, this Generation AI survey is partnering with different groups. So select the Computer Science Teachers Association as the organization. And then the person that presented the professional development, if you'd put Tim Swick, I would appreciate it. I'm actually going to come back to this in a second. I just wanted to say, if you have any questions as we look to wrap up, please put those in the Q&A and I'll get to those. And then there's also a link here that you're going to need to receive your PGP certificate. So what I'm going to do, we've got 5 minutes left as we wrap up, I'm going to go here first. And for 2 minutes, I'm going to leave this link up. And I'm actually going to put this link as a response to one of the Q&As. So I will type an answer.
Tim, I already did it for you. It's in that Colleen, Rock, and Randy at the top. Yep.
Awesome. Good. Okay. So Jenna, I guess the two links, if you'll double check me on this, the two links that will be needed are the Share Learning RAI and the PGP link. Yep. Do we have both of those in the chat?
Working on it.
Thank you.
You bet. So yeah, it's, again, to everyone, it's that first in the answered. If you go to the answered Q&A tab, it's that first one at the top where it's Colleen, Rock, and Randy. I responded in there with the links.
And so that kind of brings us to a close. You've got a few minutes to respond to those links, or if you need extra time, take your time. Just please, I really encourage you to please do the RAI one for me. And I know you're going to want the PGP one, so I'm not going to force you to do that because I know you're going to want that one. And as we close, just don't forget there's more going on with the month of AI. Next Tech throughout the month of April has a series of webinars exploring AI designed to deepen your knowledge and help you explore practical tools. Don't forget it's open to all educators. Each webinar is an hour and points will be awarded.